And that's what these guys do already today, right? Because they were a standalone NDR provider, so they have built their tech architecture to ingest all kinds of other firewalls, switches, data from all the different places. So that just truly enriches our XDR offering in the future as well. So the first step is NDR. Next step, take our XDR engine and kind of make it more open XDR around it. And then after that, kind of adding more managed services and MDR type capabilities around that as well. So very rich roadmap kind of based on their core technology. But what really got us going ultimately was just through diligence. They just proved it that they just fit our mission so well.
I appreciate the call out to the hedgehog and Jim Collins's book, Good to Great, Prakash. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You mentioned kind of the open XDR philosophy where you're ingesting all of this data. And, one of the attributes of SciGlass's solution you called out in your announcement was its use of AI and machine learning.
Right.
And, this is the buzz. This is where we see a lot of news. We see a lot of folks incorporating AI and machine learning into their solutions. How do you expect these technologies, specifically AI and machine learning, to change the landscape of security moving forward?
Great question, Eric. I think so. It's definitely a double-edged sword, right? I think it's hard not to acknowledge that kind of AI has made hacking more accessible, right? And I feel like there's two obvious things you kind of see. One is spear phishing, right? Anybody can write a more sophisticated phishing email than ever before, just because of the tools available to them through ChatGPT and other type of AI tools. The other thing we're also seeing, although I don't see a huge impact just yet, or even in the future, is just people using things like even Copilot, right, to write malware and distributing it much faster than they ever did, right? So there's definitely a higher risk in the market that I think just AI brings to the market. But I still think that the positive use of AI, if I could call it that, in techniques that we use, I think ultimately outweigh the potential damage as well, in my opinion. And to me, NDR is just, or what SciGlass is a great example of it. Our threat sync, what XDR is a great example of it. And machine learning, as you know, has been around for a while. So I think it's something that we've kind of used, and based on known things, it's even the predictive AI techniques that now being into use, to me, that are really, really attractive. That, ultimately it's about reducing time to respond, right? So it's how fast you can detect and how then quickly can you respond based on those things. And the part you have to be just careful around is the more predictive things you use, is you do have to be careful about false positives and those things, right? So you do have to have the right kind of, for lack of a better term, ML around your AI, in my opinion, right? That you are responding in the right way to the different things. So I think it just speeds up both detection response capabilities over time significantly. And I do think ultimately it will outweigh some of the other risks that the industry will see from it.
Yeah, I appreciate that double-edged sword perspective, because we all realize, and kind of the idea of do no harm, use our forces for good. With great with great power comes great responsibility, right? So,
and just to give you a good example of it, we're part of Vector Capitals. They're our lead investor, and they've kind of an AI task force. They're kind of looking at all their portfolio companies, how they're using AI. It was a great example. One of the portfolio companies ran a small experiment of using Copilot for coding, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what they found was, and it makes sense when they told us this, but initially it didn't make sense to me. It was not intuitive. Is that it made their good developers, or more experienced developers, let's call them, right, better. It had more impact on them than it did on their less experienced and junior developers. And the reason is, it goes back to sophistication, right? Like, yes, it can produce malware, but will it be that good if it's not sophisticated? No. But if you are a sophisticated developer, you actually know what the guards are. Like, you're able to get there faster, but you also know what the pitfalls are, right? And you're able to just recover quickly and actually use it more effectively. So I do think that's why I said speed is where I think this ultimately comes in for a lot of security companies.
Yeah, I agree. And you also mentioned not only in your announcement, but during our conversation here, that the emphasis that MSPs want security solutions that are not reliant on costly hardware, right? We've been in the channel for a long time. We've seen the days of, making 50, 60, 70% margins on gear kind of go away, right? As we move toward the cloud, as we move toward, hybrid workforce support and things like that. So tell us more about that trend of MSPs kind of moving away from costly hardware, and your perspective on what's really driving some of that, other than kind of the obvious that we would think of.
Yeah, I think the number one is scalability, and then there's cost, right? I think to us, it's the underlying architectural challenge, which we experienced when we took the strategy on, which is how do we, we're singularly focused on selling through MSP. So how do you kind of take that on and scale a new service very quickly? And I'll give you the best example is we acquired a company it's a division of a company at that time called Hexus back in 2016. That was our first acquisition after I joined here. And that is our threat sync. That's our XDR layer. And what they had built, amazing technology, by the way, it is the foundation of everything we do in our platform. But they had built it for some very, very big government agencies. And they had a 7U appliance just to run the analysis, right, of everything they were incorporating. All the telemetry was going there. We loved the technology, and we looked at that as like, there is zero chance any of our partners would ever deploy this, right? It's just impossible. But what we saw was they could deploy hundreds and thousands of users on this, right? So what we did was the very first thing because everything we do is based on WatchGuard Cloud, which is our architecture, which is where the MSPs live. That's our platform. And it's built natively in the cloud, multi-tier, multi-tenant. So what we did is we took the whole engine and put it in cloud. What allows us to do is scale so quickly, right? We could, you have essentially a tenant, within MSP, which is a higher layer in our cloud. Below that are your end users, which are your tenants. And they can deploy the solution so quickly across, everything. The cost of deployment goes down dramatically. We price that into our service, right? So we're kind of hosting it, right? For lack of a better term there. And to us, that's exactly what we saw with SiteGlass. That's kind of what they did on their own, just for this one service. But that also meant we could quickly get it into WatchGuard Cloud, because it's very similar architecture and similar approach. While some of their competitors in the NDR space still have a hardware appliance requirement, where they're not only using it for collection of data, but actually to process all the telemetry as well on it, right? None of that happens here. It's all done in the cloud. So to me, it's just, when I think of cost, I think in terms of obviously cost of ownership overall, but also for an MSP, when I think about it, is, their technicians are in high demand, right? When I talk to our partners, they have a handful of technicians. They want to focus on new customers and new deployments. They don't want to deal with the rest of the headaches, right, around. And so if they can deploy once and deploy it across multiple users, it just saves them so much money, right? So to us, that is probably the biggest driver for anything we do in the platform has to be kind of cloud-based, just because it scales much faster, and we're able to kind of take the cost and distribute it as well, across everybody. And so it's the best way to, I think, deploy some of these solutions in the XDR land for sure.
So SiteGlass is the latest addition to the unified security platform you were talking about before. And that platform kind of gets to another theme that I feel like I'm seeing out in the market right now. I mean, MSPs are building these multi-layer security stacks with a lot of different elements to them. A lot of the leading names in security, like WatchGuard or Sophos or Acronis or Trend Micro, they're all building these sort of end-to-end, tightly integrated product families that consolidate a lot of these functions and enable people to roll out and manage them in a unified kind of way. So to what extent do you folks feel like that's what MSPs want and need right now, is to kind of consolidate the stack around fewer security vendors, fewer security suppliers? And to the extent that's going on out there and MSPs want that, why? What's driving that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's kind of the biggest trend is around lack of people, right? And I think, to me, it's the most underlying challenge that everybody faces in the security world, that there's just not enough cybersecurity professionals. So that's why I feel like the end users are outsourcing to MSPs. And that's why the MSPs, I think, are the best channel to the market, right? But then the MSPs are having the same issue, right? They don't have enough people. So I feel like ultimately it gets down to, if you had an endpoint product, you had a network security product, you had an authentication solution, you had a password manager, you had all these things. And if you are trying to stitch it together, I mean, that just takes so much cost to and people to kind of bring it together. I think that's why the platform strategies are winning. I do think the vendors are coming at platform from different angles, right? We are very much security focused. It's that mission around bringing enterprise grade security, making it accessible. That's what drives us. Other vendors are coming from network and security consolidation into a platform, right? So I do think everybody is attacking it from different perspectives, but everybody's on the right track, I feel like, because ultimately this general belief that the more things you integrate into a single platform saves MSPs a significant amount of cost of deployment, ultimately out to the end user. And I think that's really, I think the trend will continue. As to how many of these platform vendors ultimately are out there, time will tell, right? And that's why I think everybody's kind of picking their focus for where they want to be and how they kind of differentiate in the market. But I do think the platform versus so-called best of breed, I think is kind of here to stay. I don't think that's going to be reversible. But from a security perspective, also creates a lot of opportunities to consolidate things, right? So which, to be fair, had been very fragmented for a long time, right? So I think it's created a momentum towards consolidation. We definitely have been the forefront of it with these 4 or 5 acquisitions now. But I do think it creates that momentum in the market to ultimately to help the MSPs deliver security more efficiently to their end users.
Eric and I have sort of steered you towards themes or trends that we're observing in the market right now around AI and hardware-related issues, the rise of unified platforms and so on. But I want to give you a chance to tell us about other trends or themes that you're seeing out in the market right now. What else, from your perspective, is happening out there that's important and worth talking about with respect to SMB and MSP security?
A great question. I do think, when I think of trends, I really think in terms of, and maybe I'm redefining the word trend here, like persistent trends. And to me, those become irreversible at some point, right? Because they're so persistent that you don't see any chance of them reversing versus newer trends that are kind of emerging. I think on the persistent, to me, is kind of what we hit upon earlier. I think the lack of cybersecurity professionals has reached a point where it's irreversible for many years to come. Like, I just don't see anything that's going to change that in any time, any near future. And so to me, that shortage of talent, while security is getting more complex at the same time because of deployments, right? Just look at me. Today I'm from home. Tomorrow I'm going to be back in the office. Like, we're all different places, different times. And so the IT manager's job just keeps getting harder, trying to control security around it, but then they have less resources to tap into. So I do think that is an irreversible trend, which ultimately benefits the MSPs for sure. But it also implies, and I know both of you in the space for a long time, me too with the gray hair now, right? I've been in this space for a while. I do think it puts a lot of pressure on the partners that we have who are not able to adapt to that trend, right? And so I do think, which we can get a little bit deeper as to what that means for them ultimately, and what I see there is what they need to do differently. On the newer trends, I think we touched upon AI, but I feel like it's the impact of AI, which you were talking about a little bit earlier, that it's almost like, used to be, I felt like in the security industry, there was the year of ransomware, the year of widespread attacks, then the year of supply chain attacks, and now it's everything all the time, right? Because the ransomware attacks are widespread. You're just looking for a target. You have no idea who you're going after, but you're just sending it to everybody and hoping you latch onto people who don't really have security around them. Supply chain attacks, obviously targeting vendors in the market to begin with, but more sophisticated attacks, even state-sponsored ones that are constantly increasing because of just the geopolitical situation. So I think it's just what I see now than compared to even 2-3 years ago or pre-pandemic is just the volume of things is much higher. right? And it's not just the